Welcome to Insight with Savvy and Sage. I'm Rob Brinkman, my golfing partner, Chad Tango. Not really. We
I'm
played one
such a
time.
golfer.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
It was a scrambled thing. I mean, I came in second. Like I
Second
wouldn't
in the
even
team of
count.
two.
Or I think third actually. So I wouldn't even count that as a golfing partner
Yeah.
at that point.
So the most embarrassing part, we're playing at my club, right? And a fivesome had to play through us.
Hey, it wasn't my fault.
Whose fault was it?
Not mine.
Okay, well, it was the person in your car, but we won't say who it is
I
because
wasn't averaging triple bogeys. I was averaging at least a bogey.
yeah.
So definitely not my fault.
Yeah. So the reason golf comes up is Jeff Amershadian is quite the golfer, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that you and I enjoy about the diversity of the subjects we cover on Insight is investment. I'll call them deals, opportunities that the average person just don't get access to, right?
Mhm.
And this is going to be one of them, right? Being able to invest in a solar credit deal where you can, get relief on taxes and make money, right? It's a revenue generating thing. And it's in a sweet spot. It's in a sweet spot both in the macro demographics of what's going on in electric cars, but it's also in a sweet spot legislatively and taxation wise, meaning, the government loves this, the IRS loves this. I don't know if the IRS loves anything, but they're at least tolerant of this. That's a fair way of saying it.
Yeah. And my piece, I'm excited to learn about, the energy side of things and how they're kind of pivoting with the manufacturers pulling back
Yeah,
significantly in their EV initiatives.
yeah. They what they're doing with solar canopies on an electric car charging station is pretty clever. It really is. So, okay, with no further ado, let's bring on Jeff Amershadian. Jeff Amershadian, boy, you're a guy who wears a lot of different hats, right? And
Yes.
so, Chad, without giving us a super long story that's all like cushy and fraternity and all that, how did you and Jeff meet?
We met at a project working with the previous PE firm, and it had everything to do with Jeff's background, capital raising, investment banking, so on and so forth. And so we were introduced by a mutual friend. And at that point, it was like, okay, here's a guy from Atlanta. He sounds like he knows what he's doing. And sure enough, we kind of just, went on a couple of trips together, road shows, meeting with certain investors, and, just end up becoming really good friends. And the rest is history.
Yeah. And I don't think we need to keep this for all audiences. So we don't want to hear about these on the road trip parties or trips you guys took. So, Jeff, you have golf in the background. So I know Chad's not much of a golfer. So when I say that you are a stick, Chad, do you know what that means?
It means that he's really good.
Yeah. Well, you already knew that. So that was kind of a giveaway. That was a lay down, right? That's
Well, I think Chad didn't believe me at one point. We went to the Four Seasons at Las Colinas and did some practicing, and I think that was all he needed. So yeah.
yeah.
I was like, my gosh, talking about butter. I mean, I played golf with you, Rob. I shot really well. I
Well,
came in second. I came
you did,
second to
you
you.
did, you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in fairness, Rob, I spent a good part of my youth, like you spent in tennis, I spent in golf, right? So
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to, kind of come from a hockey family. My size caught up with me. Had a couple cousins who played at Ivy League, went on the NHL for a couple of years, and were smart enough to realize, hey, I'm going to become a doctor and I'm going to become a lawyer. Golf was an easy transition. My father said, hey, why don't you play it? You're going to go to school for business, but it will help later in life. And my obsessive attitude and nature, I probably practiced harder than anybody and really didn't start playing. I was 15. All of a sudden, I'm in college playing at the University of Alabama, playing with a bunch of guys that, would go on to have successful careers on the PGA Tour. I was fortunate enough to play some on the Nike Tour, to get in some PGA Tour events. And I do remember my first tour event like it was yesterday, which is no longer, but it was the 1995 Emperor Open at
Yeah.
Avondale.
Yeah.
And I was practicing Wednesday evening for the Thursday, and I had a 1:30 tee time. And I was hitting balls between Nick Price and Vijay Singh. At the time, Nick Price was number one in the world. I think Vijay Singh might have been number two or number three. And, back then the ball didn't go as far, nothing went as far as it does now. But there was a fence out there. It was about 285. So I was bouncing it into the fence. And then there were some trees that were probably, 15 yards above the fence. So Nick Price was getting into the top of those trees. And then there were some other trees that were about 30 yards above the fence. And Vijay Singh was hitting to the top of those trees. And I turned on my dad, who played some professional ball. He's a much bigger guy. And I looked at him, I go, looks like it's going to be a long week, Dad. He goes, no, son, it looks like it's going to be a short week.
Yeah.
So 73, 75, and I was on my way home. But, fortunate to play with unbelievable golfers. I got to play with Tiger Woods and Jason Moan, who was my roommate, won twice on tour. And David Duvall was playing at Georgia Tech and Stuart Singh. So, fortunate to be around. And I really wanted to pursue that. Had a bad car accident, took some time, became a club pro for a little bit. And then after realizing my injuries weren't healing, we had a member come walk up to the counter, said, hey, Jeff, I see how you are with people. And, I want to offer you a job. And he said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm in investment banking. I said, well, I don't really know anything about investment banking. He said, well, you have a business degree, right? I said, yeah. He said, this is what I'm going to pay you. And I had a newborn son. I said, I'll learn.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm out doing M&A transactions and capital raises for financial institutions, then got into private equity real estate, did some M&A and recapitalizations, did really everything from venture to Series D. And then really 4 or 5 years ago, just said, hey, I'm tired of the grind, done well. And, I want to kind of get, follow my passion of being an entrepreneur. And that's, where all the different hats are, right? So, whether it's financial models or marketing or sales or business development or, COO, it's just kind of my nature to take on probably too much. But now I've really narrowed it down to a couple of things. I'm happy what I'm doing and gotten into a space, to be honest, I never thought I would get into, but it's proven to be interesting.
So, Jeff, just like you recognize transition from golf, you also recognize something pretty similar going on in tax legislation, right? Inflation Reduction Act. And it's probably something a little bit before that. So give us a little background on what happened legislatively that people should be paying attention to on the tax credit.
Sure. So initially what happened was, and this is November 2021, going back a few years, they instituted the bipartisan infrastructure law. So really what that was to do was to upgrade the infrastructure for transportation, and the money was also to be spent to build healthier and more resilient communities through clean water, clean energy, and power. Then about 9 months later, in August of 2022, um, the Inflation Reduction Act came out. And that was really interesting because they're going to spend another $1 trillion, but hey, we're going to get the federal budget under hand and really control it. We're going to cut prescription prices and we're going to invest in domestic and clean energy. But what was really interesting was, for the first time, they also put in there a provision where not only could you use your tax credits against your liability, but you can transfer or sell them one time. And all of these capital exchanges and different groups came out where you can monetize those efforts at, let's say, 90 cents on the dollar.
All right, so let's differentiate, just for clarity, the difference between someone getting tax relief for putting solar on their home versus what you're talking about, which is more of a commercial opportunity.
Yeah, so we constructed these commercial builds, which will include fast charging, a microgrid, and a solar canopy. And for that, investors are going to realize somewhere in the area of 40 to 50%, because you have a standard ITC credit, which is 30%. Then you have different adders, domestic content, energy community, low income, which are all 10%. So it just depends on where we put the facility, how much credit you're going to get back. But it's going to range in the 40 to 50% range.
So the ITC investment tax credit is 30% on the books, and then you can get an additional 10%. For instance, like you said, you use material manufactured.
Yep.
Chad and I interviewed someone a couple months ago. What's the number, Chad, that she said these EV charging stations that are not working? They're just plain not charging. What was it? What was her number? It was a big number.
Yeah, so she noted that only 60% had a regular kind of uptime. The remaining 40% constantly going through, significant downtimes where they're not even being able to be used.
So your battery's going down. You pull up to get a charge, and the bloody thing doesn't work, right? Yeah. So what you guys are doing, Jeff, is you have a solar canopy, right? So you kind of have a positioning of, like, why would you leave your cell phone out in the open air? It's not gonna work. It's gonna break, right?
I mean, they're powered electronics. If you look back in January of this past year, they had a bunch of Tesla stations. It was all over the news. They had a snowstorm in Chicago. They weren't working. Moisture seeped into them. No protective covering. California has been a disaster, right? Same thing. 50% of the charging stations aren't working. They had torrential rain back in February, canceled the PGA event, the last round. Same thing, moisture getting in. It's moisture, it's heat, it's cold. You got to have some kind of protection to cover if you want these things to be operational work. And the government has mandates in right now that these new charging stations have to have a 97% uptime. Yet all of these companies continue to put their charging stations out without any protection or coverage. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the future.
Right. And you plan on putting these, it's in big box store location parking lots. Is that the plan?
Yeah, initially we're looking at, hey, we'll get some land, a parcel, put them in, put a coffee shop, bathroom, but that takes too long with permitting everything. We found the easier route. There were enough groups that, whether it's grocery store, big box retail, what have you, that have unused parcels, parking lot spaces. So they said, hey, we can make a lease revenue, a lease payment, or a revenue share, utilize that space. It's good for the retailer too, because it's also driving incremental traffic and business into those stores as it's taking, 20, 30 minutes for somebody to get a charge.
Right. Now, I remember when the Inflation Reduction Act was signed, the month later, I was contacted by a buddy of mine who has a big commercial solar installation business saying, hey, there's something here, right? We got to figure out the math for a project, particularly a project where the business is either not paying enough in taxes or they're a nonprofit and they can sell the credits. So let's figure out the math to where the business, putting the solar on makes money, the investors make money, and we make money. And so it took me 3 months to grind through all that math and finally figured it out, only to be absolutely choked by the legal costs. And the legal costs was being driven, and I'd like you to comment on this, that back then, and I think it still is persistent today, there's not a lot of clarity from the IRS with guidance on that. Is it getting better, or is that still kind of murky?
It's gotten much better over the last year. There's different structures that have come out. I mean, the one we like is more of a hybrid structure where we could put a deal together. The investors have the option to utilize their tax credits against their liability, or we could sell it for them. But yeah, I mean, it's been a fast yet slow evolving project. But again, I've been saying selling tax credits for 10 years. There haven't really been any good federal credits that have come out. Everything's been kind of state specific, whether it's film credits or historic mitigation, what have you. But the only other credit really other than RECs or renewable energy credits that has any meaning is probably research and development, but those are still minuscule compared to what you can get here.
Jeff, curious, with auto manufacturers pulling back on their EV initiatives, is there a particular kind of adjustment that you guys are experiencing or seeing in the demand for charging stations?
Yeah, great question. So as we've been going through this iteration, and I'm going to answer it this way, we've been saying this for 2 years. There were two things that have to happen for EVs to really go forward. One is the cost had to come down. So now you've got a lot of other manufacturers aside from Tesla, like GM, Hyundai, and others that have now a price point that's much more affordable for the consumer. So that was one thing. So if you look at the Cox Automotive report for basically it came out last week for Q3, still month over month, EVs are continuing to sell more and more and more, despite what the media is reporting, right? It's a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
But they're selling, yet a lot of these companies that came out early swinging for the fences that build these big manufacturing EV facilities and we're going to do this and take over the world, they've lost so much money, they're not building anymore. So there's a big opportunity for somebody like us or somebody or 100 groups to come into the marketplace, start building in these good needed locations because the cars are not going to stop coming. They might just not come at the pace the government wanted them to come. But if they keep coming and keep coming and keep coming, like GM, record quarter, Hyundai, record quarter, Kia, record quarter. Who's not having a record quarter? Tesla. Too expensive still. So you still need the infrastructure, which is not keeping pace with the sale of the vehicles.
Sorry for the interruption, but this is our shameless plug that if you like the content, like the interviews, please subscribe. And what else should people do, Chad?
Thumbs up, like, and share on all your social media platforms what we do here.
That was really good visual. People are going to be very impressed with how you coordinated your hands with your mouth. That's great.
Thank you. Hand-mouth coordination.
Right. So to that point, right, and I'll go back to my experience and how you all are different, right? I got frustrated. We were getting deals, we were getting looks, but they were individual properties, individual projects, which carried individual compliance and a legal cost. You all have created kind of a deal that's repeatable, right? So, and what I really like about the program is you're not trying to cover the world. You're focusing in the Southeast, which is higher sun and heavier car traffic. So kind of walk us through that part.
Yeah, I mean, look, the company's located in the Southeast. We saw what was going on in the Northeast. We saw what was going on in California, and it's coming here. Georgia's got a big push where we're located with our governor, Brian Kemp, who has a big initiative, right? While he's a Republican, he has a big initiative for clean energy. So we have the Rivian plant, the Hyundai plant, Q Cells, huge companies, billion-dollar plus companies that are all coming here. But another thing that's going on is just in our state, Georgia Power, they've announced their first of 4 rate hikes from the utilities. Utility bills are becoming unaffordable. We're getting calls every day just on big C&I solar projects because these building owners are all of a sudden seeing their utility bills double and realize there's 3 more rate hikes coming. Why is that happening? We've got a big push for AI. These data centers are sucking out a lot of energy. We've just scratched the surface. You guys know this. We've only seen 5% of what's coming. And then you got the electrification movement. So if there's no juice in the grid, what's going to happen? Utility prices are going to continue to rise, and you can't build these nuclear power plants fast enough. That's why we love our model even more now, because it's so reliant on battery storage, which is grid supportive, not grid dependent.
Yeah, grid supportive, not grid dependent. That's a good way of positioning. So physically, it's a canopy. A car can pull in, charge. Is it just for cars, or are the canopies big enough for other things?
Great question. So we wanted to future-proof it as well, because a lot of these charging stations, if you guys see them, they're in these little fields, little areas, right? The trucks and fleets will come. It's going to be a couple years, right? But they're going to have to transport and all that. And where are they going to go? Other than some truck stops that are starting to employ that, we will be one of the few where a car can come in or a truck, because to us, it's just math. 6 cars is the equivalent of 1 truck charging. So we want to be a truck accessible.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, and with the autonomous driving, right?
Yep.
I think that it's kind of like the equivalent of railroads, right? Railroads are really efficient at moving stuff over large swaths of area, because you don't have a teamster who's limited to, they can only drive 8 hours, right?
Right.
And I'm personally, I'm comfortable with autonomous 18-wheeler on the highways that they can just go 24 hours, right? There's
Yep.
you don't have to worry about that. Now, getting into the city, having twists and turns, and it's not that the autonomous driving doesn't work. It's just the liability of, the 8-year-old girl that, is chasing after a ball and, all of a sudden darts in front of a truck. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that's a little unnerving, but I could see where there's kind of this, no different than a port, an airport, a seaport, or a railroad port, that you have these trucks on the highways doing these massive long stretches of transportation. Then when they get closer, they can, recharge, and then a driver comes in and actually takes it to the final destination. I don't know if that makes sense, or if you see that happening or not.
No, I mean, yeah, everything you touch on is stuff we've seen at conferences or heard at conferences. It's all coming. It just hasn't happened today. But again, for us, back to your original question, Rob, we want to build the 100 best locations in the Southeast. So we're providing a portfolio. Somebody asked me the other day, how many good sites are there? And I said, well, there's still quite a few. They said, how many? I said, over 10,000, right? So we're just looking at the best. You don't want to be, you don't have to be the BlackRock fund, right? You can have the small, nimble fund that selects the best location that's going to really outperform the
Yeah.
macro.
Yeah. That's good.
So what about okay, so we're talking about the infrastructure. We've talked about the car and the demand. Energy portion I'm particularly interested about because a lot of the energy policies today obviously transpired or kind of was put into place when this current administration, came into office. Do you guys foresee any sort of reversal of kind of position for what may come with a different administration that may be coming to play? And how will that affect the energy prices that we currently are experiencing, significantly higher ones?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, that's been asked time and time again, especially with the election being less than 2 weeks away. The one good thing is all of the stuff we're talking about with the legislation, that's 10-year law. So to roll that back would be very challenging, especially because both sides of the aisle really see the need for clean energy and for sustainability and another resource, right? So I don't think either side wants to start putting their jobs on the line to go against what they think is good. I mean, even if you look at, former President Trump, he's kind of aligned himself with Elon Musk. So we still think that's good, right? Now, will they roll some of the grant monies and some of the ridiculous spending back, which they should? Probably, right? It's anybody's guess. I think I think the new potential administration has some bigger problems to worry about. But again, I was always of the belief that, hey, if you want to throw EVs and resiliency and all this, make it transitional. Don't force it down people's throat. Do the right thing and make it transitional. So probably not on the tax laws, because going back in history, that's happened once ever, I think. But as far as some of these ridiculous grant programs, I mean, we get alerted every week of a new 10 million, 20 million, $100 million initiative that's coming out. They're just trying to spend the money as quick as they can. That needs to slow down. But I think that the incentives and federal credits, I think, are a good thing. And I think whether it's Harris or Trump, they would both echo that.
Well, if we look at the current macroeconomic state, obviously we don't need to pull it up and have in-depth. There's a really high inflation thing going on, right? I mean, the prices all across the board significantly higher. So if you look at macroeconomic pyramid, energy is of critical importance. It's really fundamental of where we're at as a society and how affordable things can get. In a consumer price point percentage. So all that being said, I think I agree with you. I think the spending definitely needs to pull back significantly. The tax portion of the legislation, I think, needs to incentivize companies or organizations or funds like yours to invest in the infrastructure because we are seeing a significant need for not just the energy producing portion, but the grid being obviously. Sorry, I'm going to pause right there. Can you guys hear that? There's a buzzing sound. No? Okay, that's good. Hold on. All right.
Grid being
So
stressed. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's in distress, right? And so all that being said, I think that with what's forthcoming, I hope to see, with this potential administration change, I hope to see kind of doubling down on the energy investment side, bringing back what we need to bring back here onshore and produce our own energy, enhance the initiatives in natural gas, enhance the initiatives in nuclear power plants, so on and so forth. I mean, Rob has some insight on the even the data center pieces. I mean, we're having conversations there. I mean, all those things suck a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, again, it's one of those talking point blind spots. Europe is just fine with nuclear. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And now you're seeing nuclear come in a big way because I'm sorry, it's the only way that you're going to be able to power these AI data centers that use 10x what a regular data center uses, right? So there's not going to be any choice. I think that, Jeff, here's your next project is figure out, look, if we can put a nuclear power plant on a submarine, we can get an even smaller one for your little EV charging station in the Home Depot corner lot, when people pull up.
Well, and you're right. Like nuclear power plants are the solution, but the problem is right now they take too long to build. So what is the alternative? Fortunately, because we're manufacturing domestically these batteries, they've come way down in price. Battery storage is almost like bridge financing, right? It's the only real solution. And unfortunately, they should have used it 2, 3 weeks ago when we had the hurricanes and tropical storms in Augusta out of power for a week. Greenville, South Carolina, no power for a week. Sea Island, Georgia, without power for a week. Asheville is still a disaster. Tampa had a lot of issues, right? We could have taken 40-foot trucks, put battery storage, which there's companies do that, put solar canopies, which extend out, driven to those areas, and they would have been up and running in 2 hours. You cannot just rely, again, you don't just rely on electric, but you can't just rely on generators when there's no gas. Like somebody needs to have some common sense. And the problem is, as you guys know, there's too much money on the extreme sides of the aisle. So we got to get back to center on some things to make sense.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'd like you to speak about, and I learned this when I was looking at these projects, that solar panels, the entire system over the past 5 or 7 years, they made dramatic advances in the technology, not only how fast they charge, how much they charge, but how long the panels last, right? And so if a panel lasts 20 or 25 years, then that means you can have a warranty, and you have a warranty, it really takes a lot of the headache away. What's going on in battery storage? Are we seeing similar advances in battery storage?
We are. We are seeing more kilowatts produced per cost is really the big thing, right? We are seeing advances in different types of materials, which are going to make them last longer. So things like that. I mean, when you look at, EV charging stations, if they're properly maintained, they should last 10 years. You look at when we started with batteries even 2 years ago, they were kind of that 10 to 12 year. Now they've gone to 15 year. Now solar, you got the bifacial panels and all that. Now they're 30 years. So you've got an interesting composition that really should last with, some simple O and operation and maintenance, right? Which all these companies do perform at this point. Some are a little better than others, but there's a big play there too, because somebody needs to, at least maintain these systems through time.
Yeah. Well, all businesses, your greatest expense is payroll, and you guys are running a business, right? So it's not going to be highly human demanding as far as somebody has to stand there and kind of like this is one of my. Well, you grew up in New Jersey, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's hilarious that I don't know how many times I've done this where I'm driving through New Jersey and I go to get gas and I hop out of the car. I'm like, oh, that's right. They pump the gas for you. And I have to get back in the car and wait for somebody. It's a nice little feature, but yeah. So all I know is if I pull up to one of your charging stations, I want you, Jeff, with white gloves on, to come out and plug the car in for me. So actually, that's what Chad's going to want. Chad will just sit there and he'll just rev his engine until somebody pays it. You will. Don't shake your head. No.
Chad looks like a greeter, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I would actually go out there and be like, "Hello, everybody. Can I, can I pump your gas?"
The plane.
Yeah.
That's how.
Do you remember that? Are you too young for that?
No,
He's
I don't.
too young for Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
We can remember that.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But that's how it was in the Philippines, or I think it still is, where someone's, you pull up and they fill the gas tank up for you.
Yeah. That's a nice touch. So golf, you still play? You like play your local tournaments or your local member guests, member, all that kind of stuff, club championship?
Man, he's a club champion.
You're club champion?
Yeah, 53 years old, 2 years running.
Nice. It's gotta kill the college players.
And this year his wife is a champion in the
Yep.
women's side.
Wow.
Yeah, both won. Yeah, so I had to. I was tied for the lead with 4 holes to go in our 54 hole, and against one of the college kids, I had to birdie the last 4, which that was fun to do. You know, it's fun to do in crowds.
Yeah.
I don't seem to play as well when it's just me anymore or just hanging out. I need some pressure.
Yeah. That's awesome. Good on you. So you play golf, wife plays golf. You have kids, right?
So yeah, so I have a daughter. She's a freshman in high school, and my son's a junior in high school.
Okay, so here's the question. Do they play golf?
So they go practice. They're getting better, but I'm kind of letting them go at their own pace. They, I like one of my good friends who's a golf pro said, if you're ever going to listen to your dad, you probably should listen to him now, but they don't listen to me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I had a similar. So my oldest son, who's a beast, right? 6'5", 255. He was quite a gifted golfer, but he kept growing. He kept growing, and he was realizing there's not that many golfers built like that. And this is one of my this irritates me beyond words when I hear these commentators on TV. When Bryson DeChambeau is playing, and they say he's built like an NFL linebacker, and I want to say, have you ever actually stood next to an NFL linebacker? He doesn't look anything like an NFL. But anyway, the point is, Daniel kept growing, and he switched. And when he said, I want to transition from golf, and I said, listen to me. If you take one piece of advice from your father, of any piece of advice I'm going to give you the rest of your life, do this one. Take $5 once a week and just go hit a bucket of balls once a week. Just keep your swing, because the dividends in business in future, because everybody likes to play with a good golfer. And he's a good golfer. He shoots in the 80s because he never plays. He's got a full-time job, 3 kids,
Right.
married, all that. But the guy's enormous. He's 6'5", 255. He ended up going to the NFL Combine, but you see his shoulders when he turns, it's like, and the ball goes a really long way.
Yep.
But people love playing with him because he's a big guy and he can play golf, right? And so that's the one, out of the other 742 piece of advice I gave him, at least that one stuck. So I'm happy about that.
So here's the one piece of advice I'll give for all the wannabe or non-golfers out there, right? Who get nervous when they're playing in even scramble tournaments or tournaments with their buddies, right? I've told this forever, playing in enough pro-ams, is individuals only care about 2 things. 1, they want to have a good time with the people they play with, and 2, keep up, right? I said, you are the only person who cares about your golf score. And no, you don't always play this bad. Yes, you do always play this bad, right? So,
yeah.
But just have, it's a game you can have fun and you can play forever, right? Until you can't really do anything. So, and it's great for communication and connection, like we all talk about, right?
I remember taking a camp with Dave Pelz. I don't think he teaches anymore. Dave Pelz, the original engineer that determined that the perfect putt rolls 11 inches past the hole and all that kind of stuff. But I was at one of his clinics with a bunch of other people, and there was a guy there. He just wasn't coordinated, and I was there for 3 or 4 days for a short game clinic, and this guy was there for an entire week. And the assistant pro was working with him. He said it was time for him to leave. And he goes, okay, here's my advice. You've covered a lot. You've a lot of stuff going on in your brain, a lot of stuff that you've got to filter out. I just suggest you go home, just take 2 weeks off. Don't even touch a golf club, and then quit the game. And so, it's just one of those things that, so anyway. All right. Well, this was a lot of fun, Jeff. And I think this is valuable. We've kind of purposely stayed away from giving tax and investment advice. All 3 of us know the sensitivities of that. But if people are interested in your deals, which if they're paying tax, they should be interested, because you guys are doing something very unique, and we'll provide information for them to reach out. But we really appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate it, guys. And they can reach out. Elevate Electric is the subsidiary of Hannah Solar, and Jeff at elevateelectric.us. You can reach me with questions, and we can explain our profit margin, the money's getting back, how we're going to sell the company, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I assume when you were saying that one of our people are going to put the thing right there, right on the screen, so they know how to spell it and get all that. That's awesome. All right, Jeff.
Thanks for the time, guys. I really
Good to
appreciate
see
it.
you. All right, thanks.